The last lecture in this session was prepared by Professor Glema from Poznań University of Technology. He will talk about building smart international certification for professionals. The floor is yours, Adam.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Słychać mnie dobrze?
Tak jest.
Tak.
Chciałem na wstępie serdecznie podziękować za możliwość tego aktywnego.
Well, I wanted to first thank you for possibility to actively participate in the conference. As Victor said, yes, 5 years ago we had the first conference, and congratulations to Marek Samelak on the organization and endurance in constant organization of the conference. And today I would like to talk about certification. Well, it's always a bit problematic whether certification is strictly related to education, because education has its own elements, whereas for sure summary and stating certain skills belongs to the wrap-up of this education. I wanted to talk about 4 basic things. To start with, about this transition which we keep talking, between CAD and BIM, and then to show you certificates which are CAD and partly BIM certificates, and mention that there is a difference between BIM, which is a closed and open BIM, and finally, examples of certificates which are open BIM certificates. I come from such part of earlier area of interest, which is here part of generally this AC. Architects is one part, engineers, as we may say, which I am part of. I specialized in analytic calculations, structural calculations, and we have the third part related to documentation. This is reflected in the fact that CAD was sometimes understood as computer-aided design, and then computer-aided drafting. So there are many more abbreviations, and I think you know this slide, which I'm showing. I'm showing the life cycle of a building in relation to CAD, and these 3 elements I mentioned here actually cover only part of the total, whereas BIM, it is a bit more. Similarly, we can show it on a symbol, building smart. Actually, CAD is transferring designing. Today already there's leverage that we are focusing on architects or broader designing or full designing, but outside, apart from this, we have actually contracting, and the third element is using, and actually focusing on financial aspects. So the further we go, the more important it is in the life cycle. So here, perhaps reference to the fact that we have BIM, BAM, BOOM as head of Building Smart often presents in his interesting lectures. So A means assemble, O operation, and that creates a certain whole lot. Regarding certificates, so like I pointed at the fact that CAD is part of BIM, identically we can ask a question whether certificate related to CAD is a BIM certificate. The answer, of course, is yes, because already 3D CAD forms an element of BIM, but it is difficult, perhaps, to compare certain certificates, and the fact whether a BIM certificate covers the whole lot of BIM, or is it only a separated part of it. Also in the context that we have the other elements, analysis, yes, we had known CAD 3D and so on, so all our awareness about levels of BIM here come into account. I may say that each participation here can have a separate certificate like CAD certificate. It can correspond to a certain portion of activity involvement. I wanted to give you a few examples already very well advanced companies who are involved in trainings, and yes, they are also doing certification. And based on this, the question may be asked whether a certificate which the given company is running, then for that client it is clear, legible what a certificate it is. And on the other hand, holding a certificate, what does it mean for people who have to somehow evaluate the competences? Organizer to the conference is ECC BIM, who also issue their certificates. There is no detailed information what that certificate does mean. As following examples, I wanted to specify certificates issued by Construsoft regarding tech software, or in Graphisoft I could relate it to WWSC, who also foresee such certificates. One of the new elements is certification and trainings are run by BIM Point company and Multibeam. In plans of the BIM Association, there is also issuing certificates next year, and this is yet another input into the fact that certification does exist in the market. It is maybe difficult for mutual evaluation. This slide is aiming at returning to the traditional drawing, being part of characteristics of BIM. So the levels 0, 1, 2, 3, and here again a question arises. If somebody get a certificate, what does it mean? Is it qualification at level 0, 1, 2, or 3? In majority of situations, we are still practically at level 0 area, so we have not gone outside 2D design and paper hard copy documentation. I think it is achievement if somebody is at level 1, where they already have a 3D model prepared and they can boast about it, whereas documentation still remains in CAD form. Just very briefly about OpenBIM. I also wanted to say this in the context of certification, because certificate covering only solutions which are closed solutions, that means we have a software from one company working well mutually, but it is not able to run exchange of data with the whole world, as well as needs for cooperation not only regarding, for example, CAD or CAD BIM, regarding designing, but also in the context of completely other tools. They actually incline us to ask a question whether closed BIM can be considered something which is a certified skill. More and more often the answer is through experience and practice in many countries. It is very clearly stating that OpenBIM is needed. Jan Karlslo from DTU in Copenhagen is among the pioneers, and here the whole thing plays here, but it was established in 1996. At that time, it was really very difficult to foresee what would happen 25 years ago, in the perspective that we were talking of infraBIM, 5 years or maximum 10 years of BIM in Poland, and now it is still difficult to break through with OpenBIM to be treated seriously. And finally, examples. German training company, Mensch and Machine. They are in several CADs. And please note, in their certificates, you can see the logo of Building Smart and this combination of all cycles. And here we have the Finnish-Danish company issuing such certificates based on Building Smart. And Italian example from Acca company, a software producer who is also participant to standardization process, who is also member to Building Smart and clearly runs trainings issuing Building Smart certificates. Here I would like to highlight exceptionality of our situation that in Poland we have the only Building Smart certificate obtained by Karol Argasiński. This is the first one in Poland. We are waiting for one of the training companies to get a certificate proving that they are in line with certification program of Building Smart. 2 slides regarding certification of software. This organization also confirms to what extent the given software is in line with standard, to what degree it fulfills it, and regarding software in the standard, regarding be it import or export of data, is it a completed process when it was started, when it was concluded, and where, from whom you can get confirmation or approval of this summary. I wanted to show you 3 elements as a wrap-up. Does the question remain that CAD 3D is the same as BIM? To what extent other dimensions for the 75D prove that we can be talking of a certificate related to BIM? And finally, whether this general BIM compared to open BIM is also posing questions regarding what certificate we are holding, and some recommendations regarding what would be the sequence of proceedings. Firstly, we already have a situation in place that since 2019, a Polish division of Building Smart International is in place. Secondly, there is a question of obtaining a global test for the given training company. Then something here, one is not being displayed. Then there is a question of running training courses based on own training experience and educational program of Building Smart. And finally, granting a certificate that would confirm the cohesion and common elements. Building Smart is also named organization or home of Open BIM. That's why it's worthwhile reaching for information there. And finally, I wanted to tell you that there is a chance for integration of Polish environment so that the certification could cover training centers and professionals, and here are several levels, at least 5, at which these certificates can be issued. Certification of software, and significant element for having some common denominator for 2 different certificates. And so that both the client obtaining the certificate as well as the one who is to acknowledge that certificate later on to know how these certificates can be compared. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Adam. Dziękujemy, Adam. Ja może skomentuję.
Let me comment on this presentation as I have been asked as a representative of the European BIM Certification Center, as a co-organizer of this conference. In terms of the certificates we issue, 3 elements I'd like to draw your attention to, which were mentioned by Professor Glema, but not they are fully matching the reality. There is a clear specification of certificates, so it is clearly specified what you need to know to be able to get a certificate in terms of the European BIM certification. And our certificate is independent from the software, so you can use any software. And so you are free to choose your software, and it's open on Open BIM, on open formats. And thirdly, just for comparison, numeric comparison, at least so far, we have issued more certificates than those based on definition mentioned by Professor Glema. That's just to comment on what we have just heard. And